Hey everybody, this is Dr. Osborne, founder of Gluten Free Society, with this week's research alert. Question is corn safe on a gluten-free diet? Now, before you start judging, the answer might surprise you. I'm going to show you some very, very compelling research and evidence that may just blow your mind about what you think you know about gluten sensitivity. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Now, what you're looking at here is a diagram of what are called the prolamine fractions of proteins and grains. What does that really mean? It's a lot of fancy words. What I'm showing you here on this diagram, prolamine is another name for gluten. When we use the term gluten, gluten is not a singular term, it's a plural term. And so there are different forms of gluten. Different grains have different types of gluten. And that's what this diagram is here to represent. So what you're looking at here, you can see corn has a type of gluten called zein, and that's what we're talking about in this research update, and that's what I'm going to show you about research studies. So as we dive in, understand that when you're talking about traditional gluten as is labeled on a food label, what most people are referring to is this right here, gliadin. So by FDA law, something to be called gluten-free doesn't have to be gluten-free, it has to be gliadin-free. So we're talking about other forms of gluten. In this case, we're talking about zein, which is a form of corn gluten. So what about corn gluten? This study, published as long ago as 1983 in the journal Gut, which is an international journal on gastroenterology and hepatology. This is a quote directly from the study. Maize prolamines, which is maize gluten, which is corn, maize is corn, had low but definite activity, even though maize is reported to be harmless. So in the research study here, people being exposed to corn gluten had antibody responses, even though, again, corn is supposed to be harmless to those individuals. Now let's dive into another study. This one recently, a little bit more recently, published in the journal Nutrients in 2013. Maize prolamines can induce a gluten-like cellular immune response in celiac disease patients. And if we look at a little bit closer at this research study, it's actually a summary of a number of research studies, and that's what's being listed down here in this diagram, is kind of an accumulation of all the different research studies that have shown corn to be harmful or dangerous to those with gluten sensitivity issues. So it's very, very important to understand that if you're on a gluten-free diet and you're consuming corn and you're not recovering, you're not feeling better, you're still struggling, this very well may be the reason why. Let's dive into some more research. In this study, also published in the journal Gut in 2005, the observation that corn gluten challenge induced an abnormal NO reaction in some of our patients. NO stands for nitrous oxide. Or nitric oxide. This reaction is an inflammatory reaction. So many celiac patients were reacting to corn gluten challenge. The authors conclude that this is intriguing as maize is considered safe and is recommended as a substitute cereal. In fact, it is recommended as a substitute cereal, but this is not intriguing. In my opinion, it's more alarming, because what it's saying is that many people who are using corn as a substitute are having an inflammatory reaction to it. This next research study, you can see here, published in Digestive and Liver Disorders, corn gluten contributing to persistent antibody response in celiac patients. So again, another research study, this one published in 2006. And we keep going, more on corn gluten, right? This study, published in Plant Foods and Human Nutrition in 2012, shows that maize prolamines, or zeins, contain amino acid sequences that resemble the wheat gluten immunodominant peptides and their integrity. And what does that really mean? Let's kind of back up for a minute. What this is really saying is that corn gluten looks like wheat gluten, right? And that's why all these research studies are showing that people with celiac disease are also reacting to corn gluten as well. Now, what this study went on and confirmed, you can see here, analysis indicated that other zeins, in essence, other corn glutens, contain similar sequences, or sequences that may bind even better, keyword even better, to HLA-DQ2-DQ8 compared to the already identified one. So what does this mean? When we're talking about gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, the genetic or genotype or haplotype of people with gluten sensitivity has to do with genetics, and the genes being measured or studied are these genes right here, these HLA-DQ genes. And so people that have these HLA-DQ genes, what they're finding is that corn gluten binds to these receptors just as effectively well as it does to wheat gluten, creating an inflammatory response. Okay, let's go on to the next research study. In this one, you can see here high titers were found when celiac sera were tested against wheat, albumin, and globulins, as well as against barley, oats, we'll talk about oats in another video, and maize prolamines, again, going back to corn gluten. So again, this research study showing that corn creating a reaction. So what I've just shown you is a handful of studies that have been published in the last several years that have shown that many people with gluten issues are reactive to corn and do react to corn and have persistent inflammatory damage as a result of corn exposure. So question is corn safe on a gluten-free diet? My advice, my answer is absolutely no, especially when we consider the research studies that show that as many as 92% of the people following a gluten-free diet, the inflammation measured in their GI tract never truly goes away when they're just avoiding wheat, barley, and rye. This is one of the whole premises for why I wrote the best-selling book, No Grain, No Pain. If you haven't read it yet, there are more than 300 medical references in that book, bringing to light why, in part, why corn is such a bad idea if you have celiac disease, or even if you are gluten sensitive and do not have celiac disease. So if you have a non-celiac gluten sensitive issue. So this is a Gluten Free Society research alert and update with Dr. Osborne. You can check us out online by subscribing below. Make sure you hit the bell to get our updates. Also, you can visit us over at glutenfreesociety.org. Make sure you subscribe. We have the #1 largest newsletter for those following the gluten-free diet. We have over 250,000 subscribers to date, and we are here for you. We're here to serve you and help you navigate the ins and outs of the gluten-free diet. Have a great day. We'll see you in the next video.